Brother Jerry's not here. Preston, would you take the offering for us, please? Anybody get the Sunday school words for this week? Gee, well, read them, Sister Betty. Preston. All right, we've got you another one on the way around. Let me get wired up here. We'll be going into the book of Daniel this morning, 10th chapter for Sunday school. Which I think is, the 10th chapter is, I'd never thought of this before, but I'll kind of look at it as maybe a turning point in the book of Daniel, because what we're going to be looking at this morning is out of all the visions in Daniel's visions, this is the last one of Daniel's visions. You know, we started out with King Nebuchadnezzar and all this, the handwriting on the wall. Daniel came in and interpreted the king's dreams. But as we studied on and we started going into these dreams, God was giving Daniel basically the same dreams except from the other end. He was giving Daniel the meaning and the representation of it so he could tell these other folks what their dreams meant. We know that one of the kings sort of put some pressure on these fellows. Wouldn't He couldn't remember. He knew he had a dream that scared him to death, but he couldn't remember the particulars of it. And so Daniel had to tell him the whole thing, tell him what he dreamed and everything, and then tell him what he meant. And so to me, that just goes, I said it then, and I'll repeat it again now. That goes to show me how many times have you heard the preachers and teachers and stuff say this: if God lays something on your heart, if he's trying to get you to go speak to somebody and you're nervous about it, you don't want to go, if God's preparing you and wants you to go speak to someone, you can believe he's working on the other end to get them ready. The person on the other end may not listen as good as you do, but that's the reason we need to do what God wants us to do. We need, especially in this day and time. I know Brother Tony in his message, I've thought about this several times since Wednesday night, kept stressing the point we're running out of time. And we hear that preached all the time. Ray did, I do, Brother Frank. Time is running out. Jesus is coming back. And the thing about it is you'd think we need to get a lost and dying world. We need to get a lost and dying world saved if we can. We can't do it, but we can tell them who can. And try to point them that way. But we need to get the church, the true church, to wake up and realize this is not just something that's being taught on Sunday anymore. And that's the one thing to me about these things in Daniel. Not only can I read that and find out these things, but I look at it and it's telling me about today. And as we take up in chapter 10, there's a lot of stuff in this that I see today. In the book of Daniel, the 10th chapter, it says this: in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a thing was revealed unto Daniel. I guess today it says a thing was revealed. I guess in our day and time, the modern saying about that was, you hear a lot of preachers and stuff like that use a word. A word was revealed to Daniel, and he passed it along. I thank God. This is getting off the track just a little bit, but it just hit my mind. I thank God for this book. I thank God that not only did he reveal the word to Daniel, to Matthew, to Mark, to Jeremiah, to John, he inspired it upon their heart to write it down. You know, we got 12 years of school and a couple of years of college over at USCD. Brother Tony, if you don't know where USCD's at, that's the University of Sarah County at Dobson. And a couple of years there, I don't know why, my favorite course was history. I loved history. You could run math at me all day long. If it got much past 2 plus 2, I started having problems. Science and stuff like that, I took it. I had to pass it. But history, there was something about history. I thank God for this book. And it's not just a history book. This is a roadmap. This is for us to go by. And when we can read the history, and when I say that, I don't mean that in a bad way, we can use this book for history. This book can back up a lot of what history has to say. And scientists and history, whether they want to or not sometimes, back up and prove this book right. A lot of times scientists have tried to prove God wrong, but they do more proving him right than they do proving him wrong. That God's real, that his word's real. But in the 3rd year of Cyrus the king of Persia, a word was revealed unto Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar. And the thing was true, but the time appointed was long. And he understood the thing and had understanding of the vision. Okay, that's sort of setting the stage for us right there. Let's go on into verse 2. It said, in those days I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. Now, think of this word, that word mourning. When we think of somebody mourning today, I mean, we've all mourned. We mourn for our pastor that's passed. I still think of my mom and dad. And I wouldn't be much of a son if I didn't. I'll think of them until the day I get to see them again. But I don't mourn like I used to. I had my mourning for my parents. We all do. But life has to go on. Now it says that Daniel was in mourning. That's what we think of mourning. But I believe that this was a little bit more to Daniel. This man was spending some time in some hard, serious, getting a hold of God prayer. It was the kind of praying that in the New Testament, the disciples wanted to know from Jesus why they couldn't cast out a certain spirit. And Jesus told them, said, this kind comes only from prayer and fasting. A lot of us, and I'm guilty, don't fast the way we should. We don't have to fast until we lose. We're not fasting to lose weight. We're giving up things. We're doing without things. It might even be a little discomfort. But it's why you're doing it, if you're doing it seriously. And this man was serious in what he was doing. Said he was in mourning 3 full weeks. I ate no pleasant bread. Now think about this. Look at what it says as I read this. I ate no pleasant bread, neither flesh nor wine in my mouth. Neither did I anoint myself at all till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. I'd never thought about this until reading through this, studying for this lesson. 3 full weeks, 21 days without food. I ate no pleasant bread, no flesh, no wine. He had nothing to drink. The man may have drank a little water or something like that, but nothing for fulfillment. We would think of, we go out to eat and our food, maybe a glass of iced tea or Coke or Pepsi or something like that. That's pleasant to us. And we have a good meal. Daniel, I'm going to say probably had a little water. It don't say. But I really look at this now that this man went 21 days without food or drink other than maybe a little water. When's the last time that in trying to get in touch with God, we went 21 hours without something to eat? mean, let's face it. It's hard to go half a day and not eat. But how serious are we? Now, I'm not telling everybody they got to go home and go fasting for 2 or 3 days. Fasting should be something done seriously. Fasting should be something done not to endanger your health. But if you decide, I'm going to fast this whole day and not eat anything for a 24-hour period, that's fine. You may decide that you're going to fast until the evening meal, or maybe you have breakfast. I'm going to fast the rest of the day. Whatever you decide on fasting, you talk to God about it, and you do it for Him, with Him in mind. How long did Jesus go without? 40 days. 40 days. Well, Daniel's down by the river here. Let's get on with this. Until 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. Verse 4. And in the 24th day of the first month, as I was by the side of the great river, which is, I know I'm not going to pronounce this right, but Hiddekel. Now that, we know it better as the Tigris. This was the Tigris River. The Tigris and Euphrates run through what? Runs through Babylon. And over there, it's still over there today. It says, when I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine gold of Uphaz. His body also was like the beryl, his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. I want to say some things about this right here in Daniel's visions. Like I said in the beginning, this is Daniel's last vision. This is his final vision. He's given insight. And he's given insight to a great spiritual battle. And this battle is between those that would stand for God and do God's work, and those that would destroy it, which is Satan and Satan's crowd. I made myself a little note right here. I wanted to bring this out. I've said through this whole thing we've been studying on Daniel that you can read this and look at today. When we get into prophecy, Brother Roger taught and done a fine job in the book of Revelation. When you start reading these and reading the others, these men were seeing then, today, Brother Tony, I believe that. I believe it. We are seeing today a great spiritual battle. Now, a lot of people don't believe this, think it's hocus pocus. And when I say the spiritual world, I don't mean the and ghosts and goblins and stuff like that. There is a spiritual world. And I've said this time and time again, and I'll say it one more time. And it makes cold chills start running up and down my back every time I think about it. If God, for just one brief minute, would lift the veil that separates the natural from the spiritual, and let us see, you'd think, how in the world could one more being fit in this building? Because if you're here this morning and you're a child of God, if you've been saved and washed in the blood, you've got beings around you that are looking after you. You ever had a feeling you ought to just, for some reason, go a different way? I know 2 times in my life, Brother Tony, I believe that this right here and my ability and my natural nature of loving to run it saved me from either death or serious injury. One of them, I was at a friend's house. We made music back when I was in high school. And we was up in Austin, North Carolina, had practiced at a friend's house. And it come time to leave. And folks was getting ready to leave, and I stood up to leave, and all of a sudden I started talking again. I sat back down in the conversation. Well, towards the end of this conversation, the lights flickered. Well, I talked about another 5-10 minutes, something. I went and got in my car, and I headed home, back over towards State Road. I got to Nobbs Baptist Church. You know where that's at. And coming in from the Thurman side that way, guy had got to that intersection, and way back in the curve coming around there, he had left the road. He just sort of shaved the edge off that bank around there and out into the road and hit by another car involved. One person was killed and several injured. Say that to say this. I got to thinking about it, and when I stood up to leave, and the time the lights flickered, because it took a transformer and stuff down at their house, I would have had just about time to get to that intersection. Another times after that, I was with the Elkin Police Department. I had made an arrest and had to bring the fellow over to the Surrey County Jail. I deposited my prisoner down at the Surrey County Jail. Got to talking to the jailers and stuff down there and backing towards the door the whole time. Thank God for this loud Norman mouth. I was getting ready to go, but I turned and started talking again. Went back and leaned up against the counter. We talked and talked and talked. I went and finally got in my patrol car because I knew I had to get back to Elkin. I started out Zephyr Road and got out there going by a little vine coming around to W.R. Gillespie Road. That bank there used to be a little higher back then. And there's a car that had been coming in. And again, he left the road in the curve before that, shaved that bank across there. And what was left of this Ford was laying on its top in the middle of Zephyr Road with about that much space between the top and the windows. And the boy that had been driving it was laying several yards from the vehicle itself. The girlfriend had been with him. She was in a house. And he was dead. There again, if I had left when I first started, I'm not saying I would, but I've been awful close to being right there. Folks, God looks after us. Whether we think it or whether we don't, whether we want to believe it or not, God looks after us. And yes, I believe with all my heart. Folks say guardian angels. Call them guardian angels. Call them what you want to. But God looks after us. And I'm glad he does, because sometimes we as human beings can't look after ourselves. I've done things in my life that's stupid. And I'm only here today through them because God looks after me. And God protected me when I couldn't and wouldn't protect myself. But Daniel saw this going on. Let me try to get back to it. It says in verse 7, and I, Daniel, alone saw the vision. For the men that were with me, so Daniel wasn't alone, for the men that were with me saw not the vision, but a great quaking fell upon them, so that they fled to hide themselves. Therefore I was left alone and saw this great vision, and there remained no strength in me, for my comeliness was turned in me to corruption, and I retained no strength. Yet behold, yet heard I the voice of his words, and when I heard the voice of his words, then I was in a deep sleep on my face, and my face toward the ground. Daniel fell flat on his face when he went down. God can get us in a position. I know Tony will know the fellow I'm talking about. I normally don't mention names, but I will this time, because if he was still here, I don't think he'd mind. You remember Brother Jerry Yarborough? Preacher Jerry Yarborough. Fine man. Ain't no doubt in my mind today where that boy's at. But I remember him saying this one time, and it stuck with me. He said, God has a way sometimes of getting us in the position we need to be in to listen. He said, we need to listen willingly on our own, he said, and not let God put us in the position we need to be in. He said, because friends, he said, if you ever have to lay in a hospital, flat of your back, looking at nothing but the ceiling straight up, he said, it gives you time to think. He said, it gives you time to listen to God. Time that he said, I should have been listening to begin with. But we don't listen sometimes like we should. But Daniel was getting ready to receive something. God put him where he wanted him to comprehend what he was getting ready to say. It says, then, and behold, a hand touched me. This is in verse 10. Which set me upon my knees and upon the palms of my hands. The hand reached down and brought him up to his hands and knees. Now, I'm going to bring some points out on this in just a minute. In verse 11, and he said unto me, O Daniel, a man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak unto thee, and stand upright, for unto thee I am now sent. And when he had spoken this word unto me, I stood trembling. Then said he unto me, fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand. This caught my attention too, like it hadn't before. When he set his heart to understand. Daniel was looking for answers, and he was looking from his heart. Whatever you do for God, don't just do it to be doing it. Don't do it because, well, that's what I growed up. I was always supposed to do this, supposed to do that. We're supposed to do what's right. But if you're going to serve God, if you're going to come to church on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, don't do it just for show. Do it from your heart. If you're going to give, don't give just simply because you've got to. Give it from your heart. Daniel purposed in his heart. He wanted to know. When we ask God something, how many times do we do it from our heart when we're saying, God, teach me, show me, let me understand? Are we willing to get on our face in the dirt and say, God, show me? This man had been down there praying for 21 days and hadn't got no answers. That song Brother Rogers sings, help won't help come tomorrow if you give up today. What if Daniel had to give up on day 20? What if he had to give up on day 20 and said, there ain't no use to pray no more, God ain't going to send no answer? But he purposed in his heart. He wanted to do it. There's some things that happen in this right here. Let me finish reading something right here. It said, from the very first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand and to chasten thyself. You know, the Bible tells us if God don't give us a spanking, if God don't chasten us, then we're not children, we're bastards. This right here, God's representatives and telling the man that he purposed in his heart, he set his heart to understand and chasten himself. What else does the Bible tell us? It says, humble thyself before God. I've said this a lot through the years to people. We are supposed to humble ourselves. I've heard people pray, God, humble me. Friends, I've come to the conclusion we don't want God to humble us. Because if God humbles us, you're going to get humble, and you'll get humble quick. We should humble ourselves. We should give ourselves a little bit of a spanking every now and then and chasten ourselves. That's what Daniel was doing. This person that he was talking to said that you be purposed in your heart to understand and to chasten thyself before thy God. Thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me. Now listen to this. Withstood me 21 days. Daniel said he was in mourning down by the river Hedekiah for 3 full weeks. 3 sevens is 21. He was trying to get to him from day one, but was withstood by the devil for 21 days. The devil can put up a fight, but God's stronger. The devil can put up resistance and slow you down and slow us down and slow the church down, but God's stronger. If we'll turn to him, if we'll trust in him, if we'll have faith in him, if we'll believe in him. What does the song say? There's no other way but to trust and what? Obey. That's 2 things we need to do. We need to obey God. We need to trust God that he'll do just exactly what his word said he'd do. If you're here today and you believe and got the faith that God saved you, if you believe God can save you, then what's the problem with believing he'll do the rest of what the book says he'll do? I want to tell you what. I'm just this country. I'm just this uneducated, ignorant, whatever you want to call it. But the first 5 words in the Bible, Brother Warren, says this. In the beginning, God created. It just didn't happen out of no bucket of mud. It wasn't no big explosion. I'm going to tell you what, you set you a bucket of mud out on your front porch, and you just leave it there. And, you sift it. You get good, clean dirt. There ain't no seeds in it. You make you some mud out of it, and you set it in a 5-gallon bucket on the front porch and leave it alone. And then you come back and tell me when a world starts to, after a while, you'll get some junk growing. But there ain't no life going to come from it. There ain't no man and no monkey's going to appear and then turn into a man somewhere. In the beginning, God created. I come up with the conclusion that if I've got little enough sense to believe in the beginning God created, then I ain't got no problem with the rest of it. I don't understand how a great big fish can swallow a man, but the Bible tells me that God prepared one that did. I don't understand how you can put and bind 3 men and throw them into a fiery furnace heated 7 times hotter than what it normally is, and them get up and walk around other than one thing. Didn't we throw 3 men bound into the fire? Yes, we did. Well, behold, I see 4 walking around in there, and the form of the 4th man is like the Son of God. I can believe that. I've got no problem believing in the beginning God created. I've got no problem believing everything else. God said He'd save my soul. I trusted Him for it. I'm going to tell you what, there's a lot of things in this book that God has said He'll do for me since then. And I'm finally, at 72 years old, getting old enough to understand it and accept it. God help me, I wished I'd have believed it like that and that strong when I was 21. Amen. Think of the years that I wasted. Things might be a whole lot different now if I'd have believed it strong like that back then. But I didn't. But there's some things happened right here to Daniel. And I'm just going to go ahead and skip to them. Daniel was frightened when he saw this. He didn't know what it was. I'm going to tell you what. If we're alone in our house in the middle of the night, and all of a sudden at the midnight hour, let's say, we have something appear before us, like Daniel just started describing here, a face like this and a body like this and stuff like that, we are going to be scared. Daniel was frightened. He's a human being. And it put him on his face. But he lost his speech. Let me back up. He was frightened by this vision. But the hand calmed his fears. He lost his speech, but the touch restored it. He felt weak, but the word strengthened him. God can bring us healing in times of pain. Have you ever heard the old song about the fellow was at an auction and they put an old fiddle, an old violin up for sale, just broke down, didn't look like much at all. And they started bidding it off. Said, what am I give for this old violin, this old fiddle? I'll give $1, $2, $3, whatnot. All of a sudden, from the back of the room, there's an old man stood up and went up there and took the fiddle from the fella and tuned around on it, got it in tune, tightened the hairs on the bow, and started playing it. Beautiful music. All of a sudden, the bids changed. 100, 1,000, 2,000. It was going up. As a fellow asked somebody, said, what made the difference? And they told him, said, the touch of the master's hand. Friends, I don't know what kind of situation you've got in your life today, but I'm going to get ready and close out. I don't know what kind of burden you're toting today. But as this service goes on, or if you need it right now, said the altar at this church don't ever close. I can be up here, or Roger or Warren be up here making announcements or whatnot. This altar's open. It can be in the middle of the sermon before an invitation's ever given. This altar's open. I'm getting ready to close down. This altar's open. I don't know what kind of burden you're toting today, but we've all got them. But remember this. The voice of the Master, the words of the Master, and the touch of the Master's hand can take those problems away. Everything's not going to be perfect. It may be a health issue. You may not get complete healing in this life, in this world, but God can see you through it. His grace is sufficient. Anybody got anything they'd like to add? Brother Warren, Brother Roger?
Everybody that ever faced the Lord feel as it did. Had received freedom. All was not darkness down, blinded by the light. Anybody in the Bible that's ever stood face to face with God.
Amen. Amen. Anybody else? Brother Warren, would you dismiss us, please, sir?